Nithyanandam everyone, this is Prasiddha. Welcome back to the Kundalini Yogini. Sorry, it's been a while since I uploaded a video. Life has been very busy and I'll update you guys all about that in another video soon, but today I wanted to share with you something which I actually spoke about a few months ago on my Instagram. I put the dots together, so to speak, and connected them to a concept which I learned about through yoga and Ayurveda, these traditional Indian sciences of health and the human body, about the concept of prana, which we consider like a life force energy. A lot of the diets and food that is recommended as per the spiritual tradition references the concept of prana and how we want foods rich in prana and how when foods don't have prana, they're really not beneficial to our body, and how they can actually be high in prana or low in prana and how they lose that energy. Now that's happening on one side, right? And then on the other hand, I start reading this book called The Enzyme Factor by Dr. Hiromi Shinya, a Japanese physician who was actually the creator of the colonoscopy. So he is a very world-renowned doctor, and he wrote a really interesting book all about this concept of enzymes. And this is something which really is not talked about, or at least I have never really heard it spoken about in the world of health and nutrition. But his theory centers around the idea that enzymes are what makes a food good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. And then when a food has more enzymes, it's going to be better for your body than a food that doesn't have enzymes. The reason for this is that enzymes are a part of our human body as well. We have a certain capacity of enzymes in our body which are used for all of our body's processes, but specifically very vital in the digestive system. So when we eat some food and put it in our mouth, how it starts to break down is enzymes. Enzymes are what's in our saliva that breaks that food down. And then as it passes through the esophagus and enters into the digestive system, furthermore, enzymes are really required to break down that food in the stomach and all throughout the rest of the tract, the intestines and everything. So when we consume a food that has enzymes to start with, it replenishes our body's supply of enzymes, number one, and number two, it actually puts less strain or work on our body to break down that food. So you can imagine if we're eating a food that has no enzymes, for example, foods like this would be something maybe processed and fried. So say you're eating a fried Twinkie. I know that's probably the worst thing you could think of, but still. Say you're eating a fried Twinkie. There's no enzymes, there's no life force left in that Twinkie anymore. And so when you eat it, your body is now using its own source of enzymes, and they can't necessarily be replaced. Certain enzymes in the body cannot be replaced, and so it's using so much of that just to break down that food you put in because it has no enzymes of its own. Now, why I found this so fascinating is the correlation between this concept along with the concept of oxidation, which I'll touch on after this, and how it aligns so perfectly and almost is another way to explain the very same concepts which have been explained 6,000 years ago in the Ayurvedic texts, the ancient Sanskrit scriptures, which speak about the concept of prana. It's really chillingly parallel how what is considered a food which is high in enzymes, how exactly the same things are considered a food that's high in prana. And vice versa, a food that has no prana, really a dead food we consider from spiritual energy perspective, are the same foods which also are considered dead in enzymes, having no enzymes. And so it's really, really amazing and fascinating, and I love putting these dots together because it can help a modern person understand and also believe that these sciences have something to them. They know what they're talking about. And now the terminologies are different, right? But the concepts stand very, very, very parallel. And what I want to point out to you is Dr. Hiromi Shinya in this book, he explains that what constitutes a high enzyme food is something which is grown in fertile soil, grown in very nutritious soil, and it's eaten very soon after it is plucked or taken from harvest, and it is eaten very soon after being processed or cooked in any way. So if we had an apple, for example, you'd want to eat that apple as soon as possible from the time it was taken off of the tree. That gives you the most enzyme quality in that apple. The longer that apple sits in the store or in the grocery store or on your counter, it starts to lose its enzymes. The same way if you cook food, the more heat you apply to food, the less enzymes it has. It starts to kill off those enzymes. And so fried foods, for example, are considered a big no-no within the Ayurvedic diet and within this Enzyme Factor diet as described by Hiromi Shinya. Because he's saying that when we fry a food in hot temperatures, it basically annihilates all the enzymes. Then that food is completely dead and your body is not able to process it the same. It impacts your digestive system in a negative way. The foods which are considered the highest in enzymes naturally are fruits and vegetables. And of course, grains also and legumes are a close second. But meats and eggs and dairy and fats and butters are considered very low in enzymes. And it's really interesting, again, to see how parallel this is to Ayurveda. We consider the highest prana or life force energy foods available, most of which are fruits and vegetables, fresh fruits and vegetables. That same exact concept of having fresh, locally grown food without chemical fertilizers, without anything toxic added to the soils, is the same concept in Ayurveda. Now, moving on to the second point, which how modern science ties into this explanation and proof of the pranic diet, is the concept of oxidation. Now, this is a term you guys might be more familiar with. It's definitely talked about in the world of health much more these days. The idea that foods also oxidize. The more that a food is sitting out, the more that time that a food is cooked and sitting out or not eaten right away, the same idea is tied in, is that that food starts to oxidize further and further. An example of this, of course, would be if you cut a banana or an apple. You'll see, right? As soon as you cut it, it looks beautiful, maybe it's, a nice color, but the longer it sits out on the counter, it starts to literally rust. I know we don't think of that term when it relates to food, but that is what's happening. It starts to brown, and what is happening is actually the same type of oxidation process. The really interesting thing is that oxidized foods are already proven by modern science to cause cancer, to age the body rapidly, to be high impact stress foods in the body when they're consumed, and cause multiple other diseases. They've already been correlated to all of these things. And so the more we eat oxidized foods, the faster our body becomes aged and diseased. So an example of this would be a food that's made in a factory, like for example, a Lunchable, right? They're a pre-made cracker, cheese, and little ham sandwich that gets packaged in plastic. And then it's also made with chemicals. It sits in the shelf for weeks before somebody buys it, and then they eat it. This is considered a very oxidized food. But even when it relates to more healthy foods, like fruits or vegetables, if we cooked something 5 hours ago, it's much more oxidized now. And then, even if we're taking it further and looking at leftovers, which is a huge thing in American culture, when we're eating food the next day or 2 days after or 3 days after, that food is completely oxidized and completely out of enzymes. So now that's going to be even more stressful in taking in your body. And this is, again, exactly what Ayurveda and yoga say about sattvic foods, about foods which are balanced and the best for your body. You want foods which are high in prana. You're not supposed to eat foods after 3 hours of cooking them. So if it's already been after that, that food is considered trash for your body. It's considered very toxic. So we really need to be looking at what our foods are made of and how old they really are, how long they have been sitting on the shelf before they get to us. How long have they been off the vine or off the plant before they reach our plate? How long have they been sitting cooked or cut out on our counter? All of these things matter because the more that they're sitting, the more they're oxidized and the more higher they are in free radicals. And free radicals are really toxic to the body, like I just explained. They can impact DNA in negative ways and cause cancer. Foods which are really high in free radicals are not just the things we think of that we have for meals, but also examples are alcohol and tobacco. They're extremely carcinogenic substances. And what happens when we consume a dead food is that our body fights it by releasing enzymes, using our source of enzymes, which can't be replenished after the age of 40. There's a certain type of enzyme that the body stops making. And so when we continue to eat a diet full of red meat, dairy, inflammatory foods, this is going to deplete our source enzymes. Now, I don't want to talk about all the details of this subject, but I really urge you guys, if you're interested in this, to take a look at not only this concept of the enzyme factor and oxidation, which Hiromi Shinya writes about. In his book is really fantastic. I definitely recommend it. But also look at the concept of prana and how these very same concepts are not new. They're not discovered by this doctor. They're rediscovered. They're concepts which have been a part of Eastern medicine for thousands and thousands of years. And this is why it is so important to have what we call a sattvic balanced diet, high in prana, eating foods very high in life force energy. Because not only are they affecting our body in all the ways described, our physical body, our anatomy and physiology, but they affect our emotional state and our spirit. Foods which are heavy and dead create those same emotions in us. Feelings of heaviness, lethargy, depression, and anxiety. Food is directly related to this, and even this concept modern medicine is starting to talk about in relation to the microbiome. But I'll let you guys do the research because it's really a rabbit hole, but it is so fascinating and so important to be taking the utmost care of these beautiful vehicles which we have been gifted in this life. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you found it informative at some extent or interesting in the slightest. And really do your research, look up what works for your body, and if there's anything you take away from this, it should be shop local, shop fresh, and shop organic. Get food as close to your home as possible and as fresh as possible from farm to plate. So I hope you guys have a beautiful week and rest of your 2020 and hope your year is starting off on the right foot. I'll be making lots more videos all about all these concepts of health, and especially related to Ayurveda and yoga. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon if you want to make sure to see further videos related to this topic. And we got some big, exciting things coming up this year in 2020 for you guys. I can't wait to let you guys know what it is and unleash the big surprises that we have coming for you this year. So make sure to stay tuned. Love you guys, and Nithyanandam.